Carrigan.
Thank you. My name is Joe Carrigan. I am a senior security engineer with the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. If you have any questions after this presentation, this is my email address here, Joseph.Carrigan, spelled C-A-R-R-I-G-A-N. And we're going to talk today about the careers in cybersecurity. I'm getting a lot of background noise. Can someone mute? All right, perfect. So now I got to select the right one. Here we go. So the first question is, what are we going to talk about? Well, here's our agenda. We're going to talk about why you would consider a career in cybersecurity, what you can do in a cybersecurity career, and then how you can prepare yourself now. I'm assuming most of you guys are undergraduate college students. If that's not correct, somebody speak up and let me know. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me during my talking. I tend to ramble on aimlessly, or not aimlessly. I have a path I'm going on, but I can tend to drone on. So if you have a question, chances are somebody else has that question. Go ahead and just blurt it out, and I'll be happy to field it. Why would you want to get into the field of cybersecurity? Currently in the U.S., there are over 500,000 open jobs in the cybersecurity field. And this information comes from an organization called CyberSeek. And you can go to cyberseek.org, and they have a heat map that will show you. Okay, so we have one grad student with a Master of Software Engineering program, currently working as a software engineer. All right, good. They have a heat map that will show you where in the country the cybersecurity jobs are and what kind of jobs they are. And they also do a tally, and they collect this data with some periodicity. I don't know if it's every 2 or 3 years, but this is new data that they just released this year. There are just under 1 million employed workers in the cybersecurity industry. So if you do the math, you find out that about 1/3 of cybersecurity jobs that are out there right now are unfilled. You don't find that anywhere else. I don't know of any other field where they have a demand for the jobs where they just can't fill it to the tune of 1/3 of the workforce. Last year, before they did the data refresh, the unfilled jobs was just over 300,000. And the filled jobs were just over 700,000. Now, if you add those up, you see that now we are at that 1 million jobs. In fact, we haven't even gotten to the full to filling all the jobs that were available last year. And now there's another 500,000 jobs open. Additionally, that's 30%. If you do the math, 30% of the cybersecurity jobs were unfilled prior to the gathering of the new data, which means that the job market is actually getting a little bit tighter, okay? Globally, this shortage will be 1.8 to 3.5 million workers in 1 to 2 years, and that depends on who you ask. There's all kinds of different numbers out there, but it's going to be a very large number. It already is a very large number of shortages of qualified employees to fill the roles. Labor shortages, of course, mean higher compensation. That's good for the employee. Typically, once you're in these fields, your salary increases very rapidly, if that's something that's important to you. Other than those, the obvious monetary compensation, the work is challenging and interesting. It is something that is kind of exciting. I don't know. I find it exciting. I find the idea of how to secure a network exciting. I find the idea of dealing with adversaries exciting. It's a very dynamic field as well. And what I mean by that is that this is not the same field it was 5 years ago, 2 years ago, even a year ago. There are always things that are changing, and I don't know. I really enjoy a dynamic work field that you're never going to be doing the same thing for very long. It's also a very broad field. There's a lot of things that you can do in this field, and we're going to get into that later in the presentation today. I'm going to show you some of the things that you can do, or actually, I'm going to go through a pretty good list of them, actually. So it's a lot of things to do. So what do you do in cybersecurity? What actually is the cybersecurity field, and how does it break down? You know, somebody just says, I want to work in cybersecurity. That's kind of like saying, I want to work in business, right? Well, what do you want to do in business? Do you want to do marketing? Do you want to do sales? Do you want to do accounting? Do you want to do administration? There's all kinds of different things that you can do in cybersecurity. And there is an organization called the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It's NIST, and they have a publication, 800-181, that is published as part of the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, or NICE, and it's actually going through an RFP RFC right now, where they're going to be updating it. But the goal is to establish a common lexicon for the cybersecurity workforce, and it does actually a pretty good job of that. It has gone through. They put a lot of effort into it over the years, and it works pretty well. I've got a question here. Let's see. Yeah, this is a very good question. There's a high demand for cybersecurity employees and a lot of unemployed people. I'm going to get to that. So, and that's actually a pet peeve of mine. So we're gonna talk about that as well. Let's see what else. It's the way this document breaks down the cybersecurity workforce is it breaks from a high level, it breaks it down into categories, and then those categories are broken down into specialty areas. Those specialty areas are broken down into work roles, which are individual jobs, which are defined by these knowledge, skills, and abilities that you use to perform tasks. So it's a very typical work breakdown structure from a government standpoint. If you ever get into government contracting or anything like this, you're going to see this kind of mentality towards defining what gets done. But this is actually kind of something that can be very broadly applied, and it's actually very well done. I'm actually very pleased with this workforce framework. So let's talk about the categories. There are seven categories. Let's see if I got that right. Securely provision, operate and maintain, oversee and govern, protect and defend, analyzed, which we're not going to talk about here, collect and operate, which we're also not going to talk about here, and then investigate. So I will talk about analyze, collect, and operate right now. And I'll talk about them in a very cursory fashion. These are offensive roles. These are cyber operations roles, what we call it. These are actually government-sanctioned people that go out and do reconnaissance on adversarial networks, and they're usually in the role of some kind of military operation, or in the role of some kind of intelligence operation, which is why I'm not going to go into them. You can look at the standard and see the kind of skills and things you need. A lot of these skills cross over into other areas like protect and defend and operate and maintain. But these are specifically for offensive capabilities, and they're included in the standard, in this framework. But they're not something that you're going to just go out into industry and get a job in. If you want to get a job in this, you're going to have to pursue a government career or a government contracting career at the least. All right, so let's look at securely provision, operate, and maintain. This is just basically you're going to be working within the IT or the information technology or the operational technology. Is everybody familiar with the term IT and OT? OT is kind of a lot of people haven't heard of that term in my experience, but that's operational technology. That's things like industrial control systems and SCADA systems. So generally, historically, these two types of systems have been separated. You have the business network, which runs all the IT, the information technology, and then you have the production system, which runs all the OT, the operational technology. These two things have come together more recently because it's a lot easier to manage the OT network remotely. That, of course, has led to its own security concerns. So when you are in the realm of securely provisioning, that's just putting new stuff out there and operating and maintaining. Then you're going to be working with the IT or the OT department, and you might very well be part of that department. You're going to be making sure that what is deployed is secure, and you're going to make sure it stays that way. Those are the two most important things. There's all kinds of different ways you can do this. One of the biggest things is that you will probably interface with a lot of non-technical users. That's part of what you have to do in this field, in all of IT field. You know, when I first got into the field and started taking programming classes, I had this dream that I was going to like essentially sit in a box, right? And that requirements would come into my box, and I would work on the requirements, and code would go out the other box, other end of the box. That is not at all how this is ever going to work. So it doesn't matter what you're doing in this industry, you're going to have to interface with people, and the better you are at doing that, the more successful you're going to be. It doesn't matter, even if you're not in cybersecurity. It is a critical skill to be able to bridge that gap between the technical and the non-technical people. Some of the things you might do. Got another question here? Too true. Okay. Some of the things you might do here, you might be doing patch management. That's a very big problem, or a very big, not problem, but part of keeping the problems out. You know, we have our CISO at Hopkins, his name is Darren Lacey, and I've heard him pontificate. He says, if you do two things in your network, you keep your systems up to date and you run whitelisting software, that will take care of 95% of your security issues. And the security issues beyond that are going to require a lot of effort. But seriously, patch management is so critical, and we don't I say we, but industry generally doesn't do a very good job of this. And there is no better indicator of that than watching what happens after there's been a disclosure of a vulnerability, and then 6 months down the road, that vulnerability is being exploited actively, despite the fact that as soon as there was a disclosure of the vulnerability, there is a patch available within a day or two. If it's a severe vulnerability, these companies have stepped up, and they do a really good job of keeping their operating systems up to date. Microsoft does an excellent job. Apple has always done an excellent job. Android, Google does a very good job keeping Android up to date. But I'm never, I should say I'm surprised, but I'm actually not surprised to see how often that these things are not patched, and these systems are attacked, and vulnerable systems are exploited with months or years old vulnerabilities, and they're just never patched. So patch management is critical. There are a lot of system and tools administration. Generally, if you're a systems administrator, you're going to be working a lot with a security mindset. These are these are important roles that have to be done, but everybody's going to have to have some kind of security at some point in time, right? Some kind of security role in what they do in their day-to-day job. Okay, so oversee and govern. Let's talk about that for a minute. This is a management position. I have a little asterisk here because you're not really you're not really in a management position per se. You may be advising management, you may be advising leadership, but in the role here, you're going to be a contributing person. You're not really going to be like running a business at this level. For the most case, maybe when you get up to the CISO level, definitely there you're making some operational decisions. But when you're thinking about oversee and govern, you're thinking about things like managing risk. Risk is very important, and there's lots of ways to think about risk. There's a great book out there. I can't remember the name of it, but the author's name is Richard Searson. Has a book on how to quantify everything in cybersecurity risk. It's a good book, so check that out if you want to. And you can send me an email after this if you really want to get a link to it. I'll send you an Amazon link. Developing policy, how people conduct themselves. I said before that you're going to have to interact with people. if you're in the oversee and govern portion of this, you're really going to have to understand how it is that okay, minimize that. Let's see how it is that people do their job, and how you're going to get them to behave in a secure way, and how you're going to train them, and things of that nature. That's all part of oversee and govern. You may provide legal guidance. There's actually an opportunity, if you're interested in going to law school for this, being an attorney who specializes in cybersecurity issues. If I generally don't recommend people go to law school, but if you're going to law school with the goal of specializing in cybersecurity litigation or risk management or legal advice, then that might be a good place to go. Security training, I already mentioned training. You have to think about how you're going to train all these people. And then there's an entire area called governance, risk, and compliance. Earlier I said manage risk, but there's other things that you have to worry about. Depending on what your company does or what your organization does, you're going to have to comply with certain rules. And that's all part of cybersecurity now. Even things like complying with Sarbanes-Oxley, which is a federal law that requires certain reporting requirements for publicly traded companies. If you work at a company that's publicly traded, in other words, they have a stock ticker on one of the stock exchanges, then they have to comply with Sarbanes-Oxley. If your company accepts credit cards, they'll have to comply with the PCI requirements, which is the payment card industry requirements. What else? If your company does government contracting for defense contractors, they're going to have to comply with the, I can't remember what it stands for, but they're called STIGs, S-T-I-G-S. And that's just it's a technical implementation guide, security technical implementation guide. I just remember what it stands for. And that's part of the compliance that you're going to have to go along with. Governance is also how you do things and what your policy says and how you implement that policy and how you track it. So these are really not technical positions, right? These are more like managerial positions, more more oriented towards how we're going to do things and what we're going to do, right? Additionally, auditing is big. And I'm going to touch on that towards the end of the course, but I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. There's a field in security we call the 3 A's, which is authentication, authorization, and auditing. And authentication is, are you who you say you are? Authorization is, can you do what you want to do? And auditing is, let me write down what you did. So auditing is a big part of the field. And in terms of, especially in compliance, auditing plays a big role in the compliance portion of governance, risk, and compliance. All right. Protect and defend. This is what everybody thinks of when they think of a cybersecurity defense organization, right? You might be a system administrator for a firewall or for another security tool. You might be an incident response. If something bad happens, you might be the person that has to go out and fix it. You might have to get on a plane. If you work for there are lots of companies out there that say we're going to be we have an incident response team for you. When something bad happens, you call us and our guys will be there the next day or within 4 hours or something. And you could work on one of those teams. Vulnerability analysis and assessment. And there are two things here. I have pen tester in parentheses, but that's not always pen testing, right? Pen testing is great and something that you should do all the time, but there are also vulnerability scanners. These are products that a company may have. We have them at Hopkins. I'm sure you have one at Penn State. It's a tool that sits on your network and continually scans your network for vulnerable machines. And then when your tool finds a vulnerable machine, you know about it, and then you can get in touch with the person who is the system administrator, and they have to go out and patch that machine or make it not vulnerable somehow. All right. Analysts for threats or defense. So one of the things that's come of late is there are a lot of different organizations that share data, and there are all kinds of different organizations that provide feeds on this data. There are things like ISACs, which is, I think, incident sharing. I can't remember what it is, but it's a bunch of, it's a group of people in an industry, a group of companies in an industry that get together and they share the information about an attack so that everybody else can have access to that information immediately. And there has to be somebody in an organization to analyze that threat and prepare a defense for it. That's threat feeds, which is a big part of cybersecurity. A SOC analyst, security operations center. This is probably an entry-level position for most people, but it is a, there has to be somebody sitting there watching these incidents going on, seeing if there's any red flags being raised, and starting the chain of command for when, or the chain of action for when something happens. Under the investigate, we have a cybercrime investigator, and we have forensic analysis. This is the two things here under investigate. Generally, this is after an incident has occurred, or maybe when there's something that's gone down that requires law enforcement intervention, right? Or maybe there's something horrible that's going on that somebody you need to develop the forensics. Generally, cybercrime. One of the things around cybercrime is it's really not a new crime. It's just a new way to commit an old crime. And because you're using a new way to commit an old crime, gathering the evidence for that can be tricky. And that's why there's the cybercrime investigator and forensic analyst. These are specialized skills that you need in order to perform these tasks, and to be able to go into court and demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that these events that the prosecution is saying have taken place. And there's all kinds of procedures for doing that. There's a lot of overlap here with incident response because incident response is going to do some forensic analysis as well. But they're going to be doing it more towards with the idea of saying, okay, we're under attack. How do we stop ourselves from being under attack? How we have an intruder in the network? How do we get them out? How did they get in? We're gonna kick them out. We're gonna close that door. A forensic analyst in the investigate role is, okay, a crime has been committed. Where are the telltale signs that lead me to it being this person that committed the crime? This is primarily a law enforcement role. I already said this. So let's get on to how do you prepare, right? So undergraduate majors, you can get a degree in computer science, IT or IT management, business management, accounting, or cybersecurity. I don't know of a lot of undergrad 4-year degrees that have cybersecurity programs. Most of them have computer science with a focus in security, or computer engineering with a focus in security. And our philosophy at Hopkins is we fall into the belief that we have we have a computer science program, and we don't have a cybersecurity program. Let me see this here. Here's another check. How to measure anything. Oh, somebody provided the risk or the link to the Richard Searson book. Many of us are security and risk analyst majors. Oh, really? You have security and risk analyst majors. Excellent. SRI minor here. That's good. That is a good major. I didn't even know that you guys had that major. Awesome. So if you're looking at graduate degrees, business or finance are good. Law, cybersecurity, right? And may I be so bold as to recommend the Master of Science in Security Informatics at the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. If you're a U.S. citizen, we have scholarship for service money. So that means you come and you attend the classes for free. This is a full-time in-person program. It takes 3 semesters to get out. And it's you have to complete 10 courses and a capstone research project. By the way, if you are interested in pursuing a career in law enforcement, I spoke with a recruiter from the FBI today, and the 2 degrees that they're looking for the most are computer science and accounting. They're having a hard time filling people with those roles. They are looking for forensic accountants, and they're looking for computer scientists who can come in and pick up on the forensic requirements or the security, the maybe even the offensive security if they can do it with a warrant, because they are law enforcement, so they need a warrant. Follow the money. That's right. That's Adam says follow the money, because that's exactly how they convict a lot of criminals, is by following the money. So how do you prepare? And I want to tell you, this is something that is strikes a chord with me. We talk about our huge deficit in capable employees, and I'm not convinced that we have a shortage of 500,000 capable people in this country to fill these roles. That doesn't mean there aren't 500,000 open positions. There are 500,000 open positions, but I'm of the opinion that these open positions can be filled. A lot of them can be filled with existing people with minimal amounts of training. The problem is, and I've talked about this on the Cyberwire. I've talked about this on Smashing Security. The problem is that because this field is new, there is a real disconnect and a real lack of communication between, and maybe not even an awareness on the part of the hiring manager, but certainly by the time it gets to HR, it becomes a real problem. So I imagine that there's an HR rep that goes, okay, so we need a cybersecurity person. Well, what's the best cybersecurity credential? All right, well, they have a CISSP. I'll make that a requirement of the position. How many years experience you want them to have? 2 years, 2 years experience. Okay, 2 years experience in a CISSP, and we'll pay them $40,000 a year or $50,000 a year. The problem with that is that a CISSP takes 5 years of experience before you can call yourself a CISSP. And no one with a CISSP is looking at an entry-level position. And I have been shouting this from the mountaintops for about 2 years now. And I'm not the only one. There are other people that do this as well. But it's remarkably difficult. And I cannot tell you the number of people who have come to me and said, how do I get the first job? What do I do to get the first job? And that's the hurdle. If you can get the first job, you're in. Because immediately after that, the next job, you already have the experience. But because you lack the experience, getting the first job is very difficult, right? So a couple things I would tell you to do. Start participating in capture the flag competitions now. This looks great on a resume, particularly if you can place in a CTF, okay? Because it demonstrates that you've competed in a hacking competition, right? Some kind of cybersecurity based competition and performed well. It demonstrates that you have the thought process necessary and the analytical skills necessary for a career in cybersecurity. Start taking courses that are applicable to the domain. Many of you are SRA majors. That is extremely applicable to the domain. It's great. That will help you immensely. Start familiarizing yourself with the problems in the domain, right? So not only do you familiarize yourself with the methods by going to CTFs, you familiarize yourself with the problems. And a couple ways to do that is you can listen to some podcasts. Of course, I would recommend you listen to the Hacking Humans podcast. That's a great one. And the Cyberwire is shameless promotion. I'm the co-host of the Hacking Humans podcast. But the Cyberwire is a daily news brief. They have a podcast and they have an email. You can sign up for both of them. They're free. And that will tell you what's going on right now. And Dave Bittner talks about Eternal Blue and Blue Keep, and he talks about those in real time, so you can listen to them. If you listen to this podcast, you'll be aware of what the most current cybersecurity incidents are, and that will help you immensely. And you can learn as these things happen. A couple of other really good podcasts. Malicious Life. This is a podcast by Ran Levy. This is the history of hacking. He goes back through all the events like from the very first, the Morris worm, which is the first computer worm ever. And he outlines how that happened and how people stopped it and how it worked. And he has a bunch of episodes. I actually found out about this podcast probably about 3 months ago. Somebody said I should listen to it, and I went through and listened to the entire backlog and found it to be very helpful. Another good one is Darknet Diaries. This one is Jack Resider. He does something very similar, but his stuff is not as he doesn't go as far back. His podcast focuses more on more recent hacks. His most recent episode is on the Configure worm, which is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Excuse me one second. Got to drink of water. In the case of the Configure worm, when that came out, the fix for it had been out for 3 months, I think, 3 or 6 months. It had been out for a long time, and the only people that fell victim to it were unpatched systems. So this goes back to patch management. Smashing Security is a weekly lighthearted look at current cyber events. And then Hackable with a question mark is a McAfee sponsored. Smashing Security is Graham Cluley and Carol Terrio. And then Hackable is Jeff Siskind. And it's a McAfee sponsored podcast where he looks at just capabilities. It's not really a very technical podcast. It's kind of more like I would say a mass appeal podcast. It doesn't get into a lot of details, but it's still a good podcast to listen to understand just what the capabilities are that people have. And that's the end of my presentation, but let me see. Oh, there's one other thing I should have put on here and how to prepare. And that is to get some certifications as well. There are certifications you can get without having any experience. There is the Security Plus certification. There is a Certified Ethical Hacker certification. You don't need any amount of experience to get these kind of certifications. So any of those certifications look good on a resume and help get you in the door for the interview. And that's really the goal of the interview, or the resume is to get the interview, and the goal of the interview is to get the job, right? So that's what I had. I talk fairly quickly. So does anybody have any questions at all?
Hey, Joe. So it's Adam. I was just wondering, what are some good entry-level positions? You had talked about SOC analyst, but what are some other good positions that we should look for just to get a foot in the door?
I would say a threat feed analyst is a good position, a good entry-level position. SOC analyst, of course. Many times what you might have to wind up doing if you're in the IT field, you might have to start in help desk. That's actually where I started, and that's where a lot of people started. Just getting into an IT organization can actually help out that way. And you're in a help desk position, a level 1 help desk position, for a relatively brief period of time. You're in that for maybe 6 months before you're leading teams, at least in my experience. And I believe this is still accurate, that people come into this position and they very quickly move up, because it does have kind of a high turnover. It's the very base level, the help desk is, and people quickly either move out to other positions where they, other companies where they have other jobs, or they move up the chain. Software engineer, if you're looking for a software engineering position, there is all kinds of stuff you can do in secure programming and making sure that software is secure. If we had a perfect system, right, we wouldn't have these vulnerabilities, right? We would, if we just developed our software right, but we're humans, so we're always going to make those mistakes. Does that answer your question, Adam?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Here's a good question. What region of the country do you need to move to get a good chance of landing a job? That is an excellent question. You know what? I'm going to answer that question with a website. Hold on. Let me pull up my website here. All right. I don't think everybody can see this, so let me share. All right. So does everybody see the CyberSeek website now?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Great. So here is the interactive map that is the absolute answer to your question, David. So you can see here the darker blue something is, the more cybersecurity jobs there are. So obviously around Maryland and Virginia, there are a lot of cybersecurity jobs. North Carolina, Florida. Why do you think in Florida? Any guesses?
NASA.
No, actually, I was going to say financial. There's a lot of financial industry down in Florida, just like New York. NASA is actually just a small part of. Oh, great, you're in North Carolina. Good. NASA is just on. Well, actually, no. There's a bunch of defense down here too. Texas.
There is.
Yeah, there's a bunch of defense in Florida. So
Texas also has a lot of defense and NASA as well.
yeah, and you know who's not on here is, well, Alabama has a small opening, but Alabama has the Huntsville area,
The
which has
Redstone Arsenal.
right, and the NASA facility down there as well.
Alaska's not on there.
What's what now?
I said Alaska's not on there.
You're right. No, here it is.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah. They only have 983 job openings right now, and Hawaii has 2,000. California, obviously a good one. California tends to be expensive, just like Washington. Pennsylvania, New York, these are the areas. But what's great is that you can go into this tool, and here's they're using the same set of skills here. There's not a lot of analyze, actually. They have it in here, but the NIST document really gears that towards the defense industry. So a lot of it is operate and maintain. That's where a lot of the positions are, and then securely provision. But you can actually click into a state. So pick a state here, and you can see how it breaks down differently. Let's pick. Let's go to Florida and see how it changes. See how it changes. So it's a great website that's dynamic. Yep. Yeah, I love this website. I think it's one of the best tools out there. Oh, here you can see total job openings, supply of workers, supply demand ratio, location quotient. Hope says that she can't wait to check out Hacking Humans too. Excellent. Any other questions? I've allocated another 20 minutes, so I can sit here and listen all night in silence.
Well, does anybody have any questions? Going once? All right. Well, Joe, I want to thank you for coming, despite my inability to connect to the internet in the beginning. I did listen to the whole thing, and it was great. And
Excellent.
I want to thank you for being with us.
Sure. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I'm at JT Carrigan, or send me an email at the email address, joseph.carrigan@jhu.edu. That's really the best two ways to get in touch with me. Probably the email is faster. I tend to check that Twitter page about 3 or 4 times a week. So that's not my main Twitter handle. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that. Go ahead. You're gonna say something, Ray?
No. I was just gonna say thank you for coming. It was a lot of good information, so I appreciate it.
Yep.
And yep. Thank you. See you, everybody. Good night.
Bye-bye.